We're here in the Gemara on the bottom of Kuf Tezvav Amud Beis, 2 lines from the bottom. So we were talking yesterday about the Sefer Torah that could be saved in a fire on Shabbos, from a fire on Shabbos. And the Gemara said that what's considered to be the Sefer Torah that has the minimum amount of letters to still be considered a Sefer Torah has to have 85 letters. Why 85 letters? Because there's one small section of Torah that's considered to be an entire Sefer of Torah for itself. It's a separate Sefer, and it only has 85 letters in it. What is that? It's the Psukim Vayihi ben Sayah Ha'aron. Only 85 letters in it, and it's a section of Torah for itself. So from here we see that that's the minimum amount of Torah. So the Gemara here is going to bring the story with this Vayihi ben Sayah. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in Abraisa, Vayihi ben Sayah Ha'aron, Vayem Moshe. Parsha Zu, this Parsha here, Asala Kadosh Baruch Hu, Simoniyos Mulmaila Olamata. There are signs that put it separately in the beginning and in the end, before Vayihi ben Sayah and the end of this pasuk Vayihi ben Sayah. And what's the point? Reason? Loima to say she'ein zeh mekayma. This is not the place where this Vayihi ben Sayah was intended to be written. Why is it here? It's only here in this section of Torah to separate from the Puranius, as the Gemara is going to explain soon. But the point is, Rashi says, where would have been appropriate for the Torah to say Vayihi ben Sayah Ha'aron, the way the Yidden camped in the Midbar and the way the Yidden traveled in the Midbar? The place of this pasuk should have been in Parshas Bamidbar, where it discusses the encampments of Yidden, the Golim, how the Yidden were camping and how they traveled. That's where it should have been. There's no connection right over there where it's written to what comes before or after. That's the first opinion here in this Braisa. Rabbi says, Loi min Hashem hu zeh. The reason why it has separation before and after, if you look in the Sefer Torah, there's a nun, there's an upside down nun, before and after. There are many different opinions exactly how the simoniyos that the Braisa here talks about has to be before and after. But in our Sefer Torah we have basically an upside down nun, almost like a parenthesis, that is before and after this pasuk. So Rabbi says, Lo min Hashem hu zeh ela. The reason why there's a nun before and after is not because this is not the place, because it's here, even though it should have been in Bamidbar Sinai, but the reason is ela mipnei shesefer chashuv hu b'fnei atzmai. It's a separate sefer for itself. Just like you have Chumash Bereshis, Chumash Shmos, and Vayikra, Bamidbar, Devarim, which are a separate sefer for themselves, Vayihi ben Sayah is really a separate sefer for itself. And therefore the Torah puts some money is before and after to show that point. So the Gemara now brings a connection to this as follows. Kaman Azla Hadam Rab Shmuel Bar Nachmeni Yom Rab Yonasan. So which opinion does this statement here that was said, Rab Shmuel Bar Nachman, the name of Rab Yonasan, follow? Chatzva Amudeha Shiva. That referring to the Torah, that the Torah was carved out and the pillars of Torah are 7. Meaning that there are Elu Shiva Sifrei Torah. That there are really 7 Svarim in Torah. Not 5, not the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, but there's really 7 sections of Torah. Kaman, whose opinion is this? Kerebi. It follows like the second opinion that's brought in the Braisa, Rebbe's opinion. That Vayihi ben Sayah is a Parsha b'fnei atzmai. So if Vayihi ben Sayah is a Parsha b'fnei atzmai, so then what does that mean? So you don't have 7 parts of Torah. You have the part of Chumash Bamidbar before Vayihi ben Sayah Ha'aron, the part that's after, and then you have Vayihi ben Sayah. So you really have 7 different Svarim. Instead of it being Chumash Bamidbar being one Sefer, it's really 3 Svarim. So you have another 2 Svarim. So that's 7.
One more time. The 6 and the 7, which by means one, there is 1 by itself, so that's 6.
Correct. But then you have before and after. You have the section. Bamidbar is divided into 3.
3.
Instead of it being one sefer, it's divided into 3. The section of Bamidbar before till Vayihi ben Sayah, then Vayihi ben Sayah, and then with the section after, which begins, as the Gemara is going to bring right now, Vayihi Am Kimsainim. So together you have 7 parts of Torah. So this follows according to Rabbi. Man Tana de Palagale, the Rabbi. Who is the Tana that argues on what Rabbi just said? Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. It's Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. The Tanya we learned in the Braisa, Rab Shimon ben Gamliel loime asida parsha zu sheteyaker mikan v'tichta v'mkaima. In the future, this parsha is going to be uprooted from here, and it's going to be put back in its place where it belongs. Where does it belong? So as I mentioned, Rashi says it belongs in Chumash Bamidbar, or in Parshas Bamidbar. So it's going to be uprooted from here. In the future, when Mashiach comes, V'lama kasvakan. Why for now is this section of Torah right over here? Kedei lahafsik ben puranis rishayna lepuranis shniya. To separate between two parts in the parsha there, in the Parshas Ba'aleischa, that talk about negative things about Yidden. Puranius shniya maihi. What's the Puranius shniya? Vayihi ha'am kimisayninim. That the Yidden complained. Yidden were complaining. That's the Puranius shniya. Right? The Yidden complained. They wanted to have basar. They wanted to eat meat. So that's something that was a terrible thing that happened. Purani is Rishayna. What's the first thing that was negative about Yidden? Vayisu mehar Hashem. The fact that the Yidden traveled away from Har Sinai. So Rashi says that Vayisu mehar Hashem is also related to the same inyan. That the Yidden complained that they wanted to have basar. Taisvis brings a medrash, famous medrash, that says that when Yidden went away from Har Sinai, the way they left was not appropriate. They left They left like a child that runs out of his classroom, that runs out of learning, that he's dropping the Torah and he runs away. That's the way the Yidden left Har Sinai. The Yidden spent a long time at Har Sinai, almost a year time, and when Yidden left, they were they expressed like they were relieved to be able to leave being left out of a classroom. So therefore that's also considered to be a Puranius. Interesting. So this Gemara here, there's just a point the Rebbe spoke about this Gemara Ba'arichas and a Sicha. It's actually in the Sicha of Ba'aleischa Tafshin and Aleph. And the Rebbe actually connected both opinions, the opinion of Rebbe and the opinion of Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, that it goes together. According to Rebbe, the point is that Vayihib Messiah is a separate section of Torah, and therefore Torah is divided into 7. According to Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, no, it's not a separate section of Torah. It's just to separate between the Puranis Rishayna and the Puranis Shniya. So the Rebbe points out and says, similar to what we just learned in the Maimah this morning, that Torah has 2 aspects to it. Even Torah Shebiksav. There's Torah Shebiksav that's divided into 5, and there's Torah Shebiksav that's divided into 7. When you talk about Torah that's divided into 5, that's a higher level of Torah. That's the level of Torah that doesn't come down so low. The number 5 represents the first 5 spheres, which doesn't come down to Yesod and Malchus. It doesn't include the lowest aspects of the spheres. When you talk about all the spheres Lamaila, so the 7 middays Lamaila includes also Yesod, Malchus. It's a lower aspect of Torah that comes down to relate to our reality in the lowest aspect of the world. So that's when Torah is divided into 7. So when we talk about over here, that this aspect of Torah, which is divided into 7, it's dividing between a Puranis Rishayna and a Puranis Shniya. It goes together because we're talking about that aspect of Torah which is related to a Yid that sins and that has to do tshuva, that is living in a world that's here below. That's the aspect of Torah that we're talking about. The Chamisha Chumshe Torah, that level of Torah is above a Yid sinning. That's the aspect of Torah that's higher. Here we're talking about the aspect of Torah which is related to the lower level, that Yidden are even misayninim. And the Rebbe points out another diak. The lashon of the pasuk is, because it comes out according to this, that this section of Torah begins with something negative. It begins with an aveda. Why would this section of Torah begin with an aveda? So the Rebbe says the answer is, that's why it says Vayiyam kim misayninim, like they were complaining, even though they didn't actually complain. Why does it say kim misayninim? The point here is the way that Torah sees a Yid, even this part of Torah that's relating to that Yid that sins and has to do tshuva and so on, it still says kim misayninim. The Torah reveals the neshama of the Yid and says, even when you sin, it's only like you're sinning and you're still connected to the Eibishter. So Adarabah begins with a positive point, that it's only kim misayninim. Sagt the Gemara weiter, Rab Chama bar Chanina. Rab Chama bar Chanina says, Shesaru me'achrei Hashem. They went away from the Eibishter. V'heichan mekayma. Where is the place? When we said before that this is out of place over here, that this parsha doesn't belong here. V'heichan mekayma. Rav Ashi says b'degolim. The place of this should have been by the Degolim, where the Torah speaks about the way the Yidden camped in the Midbar. That's where it should have spoken about how the Yidden traveled, the Vayibn Sayaharim, as I mentioned before. Zok the Gemara. So now we go back to what we were discussing, B'negayah, to saving a Sefer Torah from the fire. The question was asked, Hagul Yainin shall Sefer Torah, when you have empty parchments of a Sefer Torah. Right, the words of Sefer Torah were erased, and I have an empty parchment. Matzilin Eisam Ipnei Adleika. Could you save it from the fire? Or you can't save it from the fire. Tashema. So the Gemara brings a raya to this, what we mentioned before already. Sefer Torah Shabala. A Sefer Torah that is worn out. If it has 85 letters left on it, the size of the parsha of Ibn Sayyar Matzilin, you can save it from the fire. But if not, you can't save it from the fire. So it clearly says it has to have the letters left on the Torah. An empty parchment can't save from the fire. Why does it need those 85 letters? The fact that the parchment is left, that should be enough to be able to save it from the fire if you tell me that's the halacha. Answers the Gemara, no, this brayso is not a raya. Why? Bala shani. When it gets worn out, it's a different story. Because when it's worn out, it's not only the letters that fall off, even the actual parchment itself, the condition deteriorates, and it's not in a condition that it's a clear, good parchment. So in such a case, it uses the term bala in this brayso. That's why only if there are 85 letters there, it has the kedusha. But the parchment itself, you can't save. Toshema, not as another brayso where it doesn't use the term bala. Sefer Torah shenimchak. Sefer Torah where the letters were faded or the letters were erased. It's not worn out. The parchment is still in good condition. If you have 85 letters on the parchment, the size of Matzilin, you can save it from the fire, otherwise you can't. So here you see clearly that even if you have a good condition of a parchment, still if the letters are erased, you can't save it. Why can't you save it just for the parchment itself? So answers the Gemara, no, there's a difference. Interesting thing here. The place of the parchment, where the letters of the Sefer Torah were written, that's not a question that could only be saved because of the letters that are on that part of the parchment. The chi kadosh agav ksav hu de kadosh. The holiness of that part of the parchment is because of the letters that it contained in it, that's written on it. Azal ksav, if the letters are gone, azal la kedushase. So the holiness of that part of the parchment is also gone. Ki kami bayali shalmaila v'shalmata. The question over here is the part of the parchment which was never written on. The top part of the Sefer Torah, the bottom part, shebein parsha leparsha, the empty space that there is between one parsha and another, shebein daf ledaf, between one column and another, shebetchilas hasefer, shebeseifa sefer, the empty space that there is in the beginning of a sefer, before Bereshis, before Shmos, before Vayikra, there's an empty space. We're talking about that empty space that there was letters never written on it. And it's part of the halacha of the Sefer Torah that you have to have that empty space for the beauty of the Sefer Torah. So the question is, that empty space that you're required to have l'chatchila without letters, does it have a kedusha of Sefer Torah even without the letters? That's what we're talking about. But fragt the Gemara, if that's the case, the tepik lei mishum hahu. But if so, still, the Sefer Torah should be able to be saved from the fire even if the letters faded and fell off because of the other aspects, the other parts of the parchment that the letters were never written on and are holy. So what are you making a distinction here between that part where the letters were written on, the part where the letters were not written on? But if there's that part that the letters were not written on and they have their holiness even without letters, so what do we need a minimum requirement of 85 letters? Answers the Gemara, the guy is v'shadi. This brayso is talking about a Sefer Torah that the letters faded, the letters got erased, and it cut off all those empty spaces of the parchment of the Sefer Torah were cut off. So all you have left is only that part of the parchment which is where the letters are written. And therefore, there's the question, now that the letters fell off, could you save it from the fire or not? Right, so even when you have that part of the Sefer Torah where the letters are written on it, there's sort of empty space between the lines. But that empty space between the lines doesn't count. That's part of the place where the letters are written on. In order to write letters, you always have to have some empty space around the letters in order to be able to recognize one letter from another. You can't write letters without empty space in between.
It's not become a sign mana.
That what?
For sure, if it was written on over there, that part.
No, so the Gemara says, the Gemara says that it depends on what purpose that aspect of the Gilyon serves to create the Kedusha of the Sefer Torah. If it's l'chatchila designated to serve as a space for the letters, that's what defines its holiness, the letters. If it's l'chatchila meant to be empty, so then its holiness is even when it's empty. Tashema, the Gemara brings another raya from a Braisa. It says, Hagilyonin, the empty space of the parchment, Shal Maila v'Shal Mata, on the top of the Sefer Torah, the bottom, Shal Bein Parsha LeParsha, between one parsha and another, Shal Bein Daf LeDaf, between one column and another, Shal B'tchilas HaSefer, Shal B'Seif HaSefer, what's at the beginning of the Sefer, at the end of the Sefer, Mitamenes HaYidayim, the halacha of Tumah applies to it. If you remember, we learned this in the first Perek, Chachamim made a gzeira of Tumah in order that they shouldn't store food near the Sfarim, and then the mice came and ate up the Sfarim, so they made a halacha of Tumah, that is a sheni l'tumah if anything touches the Sefer Torah. So that gzeira of Tumah applies not only if you touched the Sefer Torah where there's writing on it, but even if you touched part of the parchment where there's no writing on it. So l'chayre, you see over there that it has the Kedusha of a Sefer Torah, even if it's not part of the place where it's written on it. And it says the Gemara, Dilme Agav Sefer Torah Shani. No, that case is different. Over there we're talking about where the writing on the Sefer Torah is still there. If all the letters are still there. If all the letters are still there, so then the empty spaces of the Gilyon, of the parchment, are Kadosh, are holy together with the Sefer Torah. Over here, our question is, when you have the letters faded, when the letters got erased. And now the question is, do I say that that empty part of the Gilyon, does it have the Kedusha of the Sefer Torah when the letters, the writing of the Sefer Torah faded? So that's a different question. We don't have an answer to that. Toshama, another Braise, Hagilyonin. The parchments, the empty parts of the parchment of the Sefer Torah. Sifrei Minin. The Sefer Torah that's written by a min. That's what Rashi here says. Rashi says, Misharsim Lavei Zara. It was written by a min, by an apikaitis, by people that are serving Avodah Zarah. You don't save this from a fire. You can burn it in its place. You can burn the Sefer Torah, including even with the names of the Eibishter that are written in the Sefer Torah by a min, by a apikaitis. It doesn't have the holiness of the Eibishter's name. You don't have to save it from the fire.
Even now in Shabbos.
Yeah, we'll see soon. The Gemara is going to come back to this in a moment. So my love, what do you think the pshara in this braisa is? When it says Gilyonin, the first thing it mentions in this braisa is the empty part of the parchment. Gilyonin is Sefer Torah. It's the empty part of the Sefer Torah that you can save it from a fire, even if there's no other letters on it. Answers the Gemara, loy, that's not the pshat. You have to read it together. Gilyonin de sifrei minin. When it says Hagilyonin vis sifrei minin, it really goes together. We're talking about the empty part of the parchment of sifrei minin, of the Sefer Torah that's written by an apikaitis. So the Gemara asks on this, why does it have to say this? Hash de sifrei minin gufayu ein matzilin. If the actual Sefer Torah that has the letters of a Sefer Torah, has the Eibishter's name in it, you can't save that from the fire. Gilyonin mibaya. Does the Braisa have to tell me that the empty parchments of a sefer of an apikaitis, that you don't save it from the fire? It's obvious. Answers the Gemara, Hachi Ka'amar. This is what the Braisa means to say. Sifrei minin, the sefer that is written by a min, harehen kigilyonin. Their value, their holiness is like an empty parchment. That's just like an empty parchment that was never written on it. We're not talking about an empty parchment that faded. Just like an empty parchment that was never used b'chlal as a sefer Torah, a min that writes letters of a sefer Torah, it's like it's empty. It doesn't have the kedusha of a sefer Torah b'chlal.
What do you mean en matzil? Chatchila serfon.
Huh?
Sefer Torah should cost for men serfon. So
correct.
It's not only in matzil. The chatchila you should take it and put it.
And a chanami. The Gemara is going to soon bring that. But over here, this braisa is talking about the halacha. If a fire breaks out on Shabbos, and you have these sefer Torah of a min in it, should you run in to save it? Are you allowed to save it on Shabbos? So he's telling you no, because it's like Gilyonim. It's like a Sefer Torah that was never written on. But you're right, the emes is, l'chatchila you go, the Gemara here is going to bring now the source of this inyan. Here, let's see. Guf hagilyainen v'sifrei minin ein matzilin oisam mepnei adleika. If it's in a fire, you don't save them on Shabbos from a fire. Rabbi Yosi Omer, so Rabbi Yosi says and adds what we mentioned, b'chayil, even during the weekday, kaider esas goddess, cut out. So he holds you have to cut out the names of the Eibusher that I mentioned there, shebehen, the haskadah shebehen, v'gainzon, and that you do have to put away. V'ashar seifa, but the rest you're allowed. You chatchila go. You're supposed to go and burn it. Tarfon disagrees. Omer Tarfon, akapeach as bini. I should lose my child over this subject. He's so certain about this, and he says, "She'im yavoyu liyadi." If the Sefer Torah like this would come to my hand, sha'ani esreif oisam ve'es ha'askara shebehen. I will burn it, including the names of the Eibusher in it. If it's written by a person that's a min. The names of the Eibusher, even that are written in it, don't have any holiness. Yeah, it is.
I would not burn them.
Huh?
I would not burn them.
He would. Shim yavoyu liyadi.
Shani Esreif.
She'ani esreif, huh?
Oh, they made a mistake here. I would not burn them.
I'm not sure. I believe that's the pshat of here. Shani esreif oisam ve'es ha'askara shebehen, that I would burn them together with the names of the Eibusher mentioned there. Sha'afila adam roidif achrav lahargai. Even a person that his life is in danger, someone is chasing you and he wants to kill you, or v'nachash ratz la'akishay, or there's a snake that's chasing you, that wants to bite you. Nichnas lebeis avodah zarah. Where should a person enter to save himself? You should rather go into a beis avodah zarah, into a church, to save himself. But ve'ein nichnas lebatei and shalelo, and he shouldn't go into a place of these apokorsim, of these minim that deny and go against the Eibusher. They write these sifrei Torah and they go against the Eibusher. Why? Why are they worse off? Shahalalu makirim v'kaifrim. These minim that write the Sefer Torah, they recognize, they know the Eibusher, and they deny, and they are writing the Sefer Torah. But v'alalu, you go into a beis avodah zarah, ein makirim v'kaifrim. They don't know. They're serving avodah zarah. They don't deny the Eibusher's existence because they don't know. Regarding these minim that write such a Sefer Torah, the pasuk says, behind the doorpost, samta zechreinech, you put his memory. Meaning, as Rashi says, they know the Eibusher. Zechreinech, they remember, they know who the Eibusher is. And yet, they fight him, and they write it, and they're in our pekursim, and therefore you shouldn't enter into their place, even when your life is in danger. Okay, so this is the source of this concept where you see that this kind of a Sefer Torah has no kedusha whatsoever. Rabbi Shmuel also continues in this brayso and says the same point, and he brings it from a different angle. Kal v'chaymer, u'ma las l'shalom b'nishla ishtay. In order to create peace between husband and wife, Amra Torah shmi shenichtav b'kedusha, my name that was written with holiness, yimacha al hamayim, could be erased in water to prove that she's still permitted to live with her husband. These individuals that bring about jealousy and hatred and competition between the Yidden and the Eibusher. Right? They're writing such a kind of Sefer Torah and they're apokorsim, and they bring about the big rift between the Yidden and the Eibusher. Allah has kama v'kama, most definitely that it's worthy that you should take what they wrote that has no kedusha and you should erase it. David, regarding them, David HaMelech says, Halei misanecha Hashem esna, those that hate the Eibusher I hate, ubiskoimimecha eskaitot, and I fight with those that stand up against you. Tachlis sinis and asim, with the utmost hatred I hate them. Le'oivim hoyoli, and they were enemies to me. Brayso continues, Kishein she'ein matzilin oisel mipnei adleika, just as you don't save it from a fire on Shabbos, if it fell under a house, if it's under a house that collapsed, you can't save it from there. Not from water. Anything that's coming to destroy it, there's no point, there's no inyan of saving it. You're allowed to go and burn it, as it said before, Rabbi Yosi said. Right? So this is the story with these kind of Sifrei Torah. They have no kedusha in it whatsoever. So you have today these Sifrei Torah, or these books that were written by, Reform or whatever it is, people that are mamish kaifrim and Torah misinai. They have no kedusha in it whatsoever. Yes. You walk into these hotels and they have these Bibles. You open the top drawer, they have the Bible there for you. They have absolutely no kedusha in it whatsoever.
What about printed?
The same thing. It's the same thing.
What about like a conservative?
Same thing. Conservative, reform with Hashem's name. conservative are just as much as apikorasim. They don't believe in Teirim and Hashemayim. It's the same thing.
Yeah, with a printer, said you can be orthodox and you have.
But it's being printed for a certain.
The intention.
It's not yet. It's the. Yeah, and the Sedurim, all kinds of things, whatever. It's not only Chumashim, but it's Bechlal. Bayaminei Yosef, or the Bachas Geiris, Bayaminei Rab Yosef Bar Chonim Rabavo. Hani Sifri de Be'avidon. These Sfarim that were written by Be'avidon. What's Be'avidon? Rashi says it was a place where they came to have vikuchim. They had the debates amongst the Yidden and Goyim, and they wrote different Sfarim of Torah to be used in these debates to prove their points. So he asked, are they written in a way that it has a holiness to it and you're allowed to save it from a fire or not? He wasn't sure about it. It's not mamish something that's written by Apikorsim. It was written to be used in these debates. So the question is, could it be saved from the fire or not? Now the Gemara says, Rav never went to join in any of these debates. He definitely didn't go Lebein Nitzrifi. As Rashi says, it's a name of an Avodah Zarah. A place of Avodah Zarah he for sure didn't go to. Shmuel, Lebein Nitzrifi lo yazal, to this place, Bein Nitzrifi, which is Avodah Zarah, he didn't go. But Levei Avidon azal, to the place where there was the debates, he did participate in these debates, he did go there. We know there's many stories of in the times of the Rishonim, where they were forced into participating in these debates. It was the famous debates of the Ramban that he was forced to join and he had to run away. He went to Eretz Yisrael. But in the times of the Rishonim, and here we see even in the times of the Gemara, this was something which was very common.
Kuzari, right?
Huh?
The Kuzari.
Kuzari also written based on that, yeah.
What's the chiddush that they didn't go to Bein Nitzrifi?
Yeah, what's the chiddush? It's a good question. Amru Leila Rava. So they said to Rava, they offered Rava, and they asked him, "My time why don't you come to this place to the debates?" So he was looking for an excuse. Amalahu, he said, Dikla planya ikke beorche. There is a tree that's in the way, and the kashi. It's difficult for me to get there. The tree is in my way. So he told him, Nakre, we'll uproot the tree. We'll get it out of your way. You'll be able to go. Mm-hmm. So he said, No, duchte kashali. But then you'll uproot the tree, so then there'll be a ditch. It'll be hard for me to get by there. So he didn't want to go. Mar bar Yosef, Omar Bar Yosef said, Anami nayu ana, I'm from them, and v'loy mistafinu minayu. I'm not afraid of them. I'll go there. And Zimna Chada, and once he went to join these debates, and Zimna Chada Ozl, he once went there, Bayel Sakune. They wanted to put his life in danger. So it wasn't so pashut with these debates. You can't win with them, because if you lose, so then you're in trouble. If you win, you're also in trouble. They'll put your life in danger. So now the Gemara brings another interesting story about such a situation with a person that was an apikaitis. Ima Shalom.
Does it mean it specifically means a Christian? Or?
No. Chayre means even a Yid.
Dafka Yid, that's the whole...
Chayre, yeah.
I'm saying, is it a Yid that believed...
yeah, that's what...
Does it Dafka mean someone like Marvin Yasher Neitzer or Dafka?
Not sure. Ima Shalom, the Bisu de Rabbi Eliezer. Ima Shalom, she was the wife of Rabbi Eliezer. And Achse de Rabbi Gamliel. She was the sister of Rabbi Gamliel. Havoi, that's who she was. Hava hahu philosopher b'shvevusei. There was a philosopher. Rashi here, if you look at a philosopher, a min. There was a min in Apikaitis in her neighborhood. So he was an Apikaitis, and as we'll see soon, he was a person that people would come to him for judgment. People would come to him for all kinds of things. The Havashakal Shema, he made himself a name, that he can't bribe him, he's a very honest individual, and people would come to him to settle their disputes. And really, as Rashi here says, he secretly did take bribes. Mm-hmm. But he made himself a name, that he's an honest individual, and he was really an apikaitis, and he would take bribes. So Ima Shalom and Rabbi Eliezer decided that they want to ridicule him, they want to expose this person. So what did they do? Ayla le shrage de dava. So she, Ima Shalom, bribed him with a gold lamp, gold candle, whatever it is. And then they came to him, and they came to him for a judgment. And Amr Alei, she says to this individual, to this min, I want to divide the inheritance that I received with my brother. Amalahu, she came together with her again, Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel came together. Is it over here? She was the sister of Rabbi Gamliel, so she came together with Rabbi Gamliel. She wants to divide the inheritance. Amalahu, so he says to them, Pelugu, divide. So Amalei, so she said to him, but Ksivlon, it says in the Torah, b'mokim bra brata leitirus, that when you have a son, the daughter does not inherit. So I'm left out. I'm not going to get anything. Amar law. So this Apikaira says to her, min yaimid de galisun ma'arachain, from the time that you have been exiled from your land, is natalis ayraisa de Moshe. The Torah of Moshe has been taken away from you. Vis yahiva sifra achriti. And there's another sefer, there's another book that we learn our halachas from. Uksiv Bey, and in this other book that I have, it says, Bra ubrata kechada yarton, that the son and the daughter could inherit equally. Okay, so she bribed him, so that's the response that she got from him, that she could inherit together with her brother. What happened? Lamachar, the next day, hadar ayale ihu chamra luba. So now he, Rabbi Gamliel, bribed him. And Rabbi Gamliel bought him a very expensive donkey, a donkey from Luba. Amalahu, so now he changed his mind. Now they came back to him again for a second session, I guess. So now he changed his mind. He got bribed from Rabbi Gamliel, and this was a much more expensive bribe. It wasn't just a Pesach candle. Amalahu, shfilis l'sefer de sifra. Actually, continue reading in this new book that I have, and there at Ksiv Bey it says, Ana loyla mifchas minay raisa de Moshe Sisi. I'm not coming to diminish or take away from anything that's written in the Torah of Moshe. V'loyla yisufel raisa de Moshe Sisi. And I'm not going to add anything to what it says in the Torah of Moshe. Ksiv Bey, and it says in the Torah, b'mokim bra brata loy teiris. When you have a son, the daughter does not inherit. So everything should go to Rabbi Gamliel. Amr Alei, so she wanted to remind him of the bribe that she gave him. So she said to him, Nahar nahayrech kishraga. Your light should shine like the lamp that I gave you. It should shine. Don't forget about the lamp that I bribed you. Amr Alei Rabbi Gamliel. So Rabbi Gamliel said to him, Asa chamra ubata shlashraga. My donkey came and knocked over the lamp that you gave. So they exposed him that he was a person that's taking sheikhad, and he was off, out of business. Okay, we come back to the Mishnah. What did it say in the Mishnah? That on Shabbos you don't read from Ksuvim. Why don't you read from Ksuvim? In order that people should not get distracted with learning Ksuvim and not join the lecture, the shir that they had once a week in Beis Medrash for all the people to come and learn.
The halacha shir.
Yeah, the halacha shir that they had on Shabbos. Amar Rav, so Rav said, Lo yishanu ela b'zman Beis HaMedrash. When did they say you shouldn't learn Ksuvim? Only in the time of this shir in the Beis HaMedrash. Rashi says that the time of this shir was in the morning hours, before they ate. I guess after Shachris, they had a speech, they had a shir. So then, at that time, you shouldn't read from Ksuvim. But if it's not in the time when the lecture is being given, you're allowed to learn from Ksuvim and the rest of Shabbos. Shmuel Amar, but Shmuel said, even if it's not in the time when the shir is being given in the Beis HaMedrash, even later in the afternoon when you eat, you're still not allowed to read from the Ksuvim on Shabbos. That's the machlekes of Rav and Shmuel. Was it only said in that time when the shir is being given, or was this said regarding the entire Shabbos? Sagt the Gemara, Eini, is this the case? But v'ha Nerda, Asrei, the Shmuel Ave, Nerda is the city where Shmuel lived. Uben Nerda, Paski Sidre B'Ksuvim B'Mincha Sidre Shabbata. In Nerda, the minig was that they said a haftarah by Shabbos Mincha. They also said a haftarah. By Shabbos morning, they said a haftarah from Nevi'im. And by Shabbos Mincha, they said a haftarah from Ksuvim. So they did read Ksuvim Shabbos afternoon. Allah says the Gemara, "Itmer hachi itmer." We have to go back to the argument between Rav and Shmuel, and really the argument was different. Omar Rav said, "Lo yishanu ela b'makom beis hamedrash." Where do they say that you shouldn't learn ksuvim? In the place, in the Beis Medrash, where the shir is being given. So there, don't read from the ksuvim during the shir in the Beis Medrash. Aval shaloi b'makom Beis Medrash. If you're not there in the Beis Medrash at the time of the shir, if you're in a different place or you're home, then kairim, you can read from the ksuvim even during the time of the shir. Shmuel Amar, Shmuel said, Bein b'makom Beis Medrash, Bein shaloi b'makom Beis Medrash. Whether you're in the Beis Medrash, whether you're not in the Beis Medrash. Bisman Beis HaMedrash, if it's at the time of the shir, ein kairim. We don't read from ksuvim. But shaloi bisman Beis Medrash, but if it's not at the time of the shir, kairim. You can read from ksuvim. And therefore it fits with what they did in the city of Nerdad, that later in the afternoon, by the time of Mincha, they would say a haftarah from ksuvim. That's what V'azla Shmuel Taimei. And this is Shmuel follows his opinion of the way it was done in his city. The Benarda Paski Sidr the Ksuvim b'Mincha Sidr Shabbata. They would say the haftarah of Ksuvim at the time of when they were laning by Mincha. That's one pshat. Ravashi Amar. Ravashi says no. Really, we can go back to the original machlokes the way it was. La'olam k'da'amara me'ikara. Really, the argument before between Rav and Shmuel that they were arguing about the time of the shir. Is it only during the time of the shir or even not at the time of the shir? So that argument could stay. What Shmuel said before in that argument is following what Rab Nechemya said. The Tani we learned in Abraise, Amru, Kisvei HaKodesh Ein Kairim Ben, that the Kisvei HaKodesh, you don't read from the Kisvei HaKodesh itself, Avol Shoinen Ben, V'Dorshin Ben, but you could read Medrashim and different things in connection to the Kisvei HaKodesh. That's allowed. Nitzrach lepasik, if he needs a proof that he has to see something in a pasik, maybe v'royabay. He's allowed to come and look inside the Kisvei HaKodesh. It's not completely, the takana wasn't that you're not allowed to look into the Kisvei HaKodesh at all. If you have to see something, you're allowed to look inside. Now, Amr Rab Nechemya has a completely different opinion about this. He says, what's the reason why on Shabbos you don't read from the Kisvei HaKodesh? In order that people should say, the Kisvei HaKodesh ein kairin. If you can't read from Kisvei HaKodesh on Shabbos, the kol shekain b'shtari adyatis. For sure, any mundane documents on Shabbos you're not allowed to read. So according to Rab Nechemya, this has nothing to do with making people available to be by the shir. This is for a different point. In order for people to realize that Shabbos is a holy day, and on Shabbos you're not allowed to read Shtare Hadyaitis, and therefore they said that you shouldn't even read from Kisvei Kodesh. So what's the pshat over here in the Gemara? We don't paskin like Rav Nechemya. So Shmuel in his city in Nerdah, he allowed them to read from the Kisvei Kodesh because he paskin like the Tanna Kama, not like Rav Nechemya. But before, in the argument of Rav and Shmuel, what Shmuel was saying was according to Rav Nechemya. Now in the pshat of Shtari Adyaitis, there's a machlokes here of Rashi and Taisvis. If you look in Rashi, so Rashi says Shtari Adyaitis shel cheshbainis or igris hashluches limtzei chayfetz, or b'chlal, any letters that there's documents or things, not even necessarily business matters, not necessarily any kind of thing that's in the letters. Taisvis, however, disagrees. Taisvis says that Shtari Adyaitis is only things that are business related, money related, and such kind of things. But if it's mundane things that are written in letters, that's not part of the Isser to read Shtari Adyaitis and Shabbos. This is very relevant today when you get to reading newspapers on Shabbos, if anyone still uses newspapers, or even all kinds of
cooking
magazines and things that have all kinds of advertisements in it, and the advertisements are things that are Shtari Adyaitis. It's things that you can buy, things that you can sell. There's the classifieds and all kinds of things. So those things on Shabbos, Shtari Adyaitis, even according to Taisus' pshat that it only refers to business-related matters, is not allowed to be read on Shabbos. It's a problem with Shtari Adyaitis.
There's another issue.
Yeah.
There's another issue. It's negative, a lot of negative news. Anything that pains you.
It's another issue, correct? Kolpanim, it's not so pashut.
Kosher cooking book, kosher cooking magazine.
Also reading things about cooking on Shabbos that it's, yeah.
Very young, if you could
Okay, we'll stop it there. Huh?